Okay, go for it.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Season Dialogue. I told you guys that I was trying to incorporate some people into the podcast, and I got one. Y'all. So I want to welcome Breanne Burke from the Gold Digger Guide podcast. We did a podcast on a yesterday, which is not a yesterday for y'all, but we're going to switcheroo and I'm going to ask her some questions. We're going to get to know her. And also, I want the listeners to also listen to her. So I also went in and I listened to some of the episodes. Quite interesting. One thing I can say about you is that you have this happy, free, jolly, like whole persona. It puts you in a good mood. I ain't even gonna lie. It's like if you in a bad mood, just turn her on and you like, okay.
I really appreciate that. That's really sweet.
I love it. So, okay, Breanne, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? If you want to share your age, what do you do? Tell me the whole rigmarole.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I said, my name is Breanne Burke. I am 31. To give
Mhm.
everybody a little bit of a timeline, I am living in Toronto. So, I actually grew up though in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. Most people in the world know actually where that is because
Mhm.
it's just a significant little town. However, growing up there, outside of the tourism industry, it's actually very small town
Mhm.
vibes. So with that, obviously we all know like the pros and cons of living in a small town, but someone that is unapologetically as ambitious as I am, I was always one to like push the norms, expand my comfort zone, and do all of those things. And so as of now, there's a story which we can dive into kind of to get me where I am today. Sorry. And I am currently a mindset and confidence coach, predominantly for millennial women, give or take a few years, like older or younger. And there's different milestones and highs and lows that got me to where I am today. And I also, as Lisa said, I have a podcast, The Gold Digger Guide, and that's all predominantly focused around self-development. So we can all support each other in a community and really lead by example and show up as the best versions of ourselves in all areas of our life. And it's really, really a passion of mine. And I think there are a lot of pivotal moments in my life and challenges and experiences that got me to where I am today. By no means has it been linear whatsoever. It's been very up and down, but I'm really, really happy and very grateful with where I'm at today and now and what I'm doing.
Wow. So, okay. So you talked about the coaching and then the podcast. Now, what came first? Was it the coaching or the podcast?
They actually kind of came within the same year.
Okay.
Yeah, they came in the same year. The podcast I launched in February 2021, and then I started offering coaching services by that September
Mhm.
because I put myself through a very intense full-on certification, which is like life and success coaching, EFT, NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming for those of you that are unsure of the acronym, and all of those things. And I wanted to do that just to ensure that I knew and was confident that I could get people the results that they desired. Because I, at that point, had already been a certified yoga teacher. So I'd been very much in this space of
Mhm.
holding space for other people and being in that environment of self growth and prosperity and like I don't want to say just positivity, but understanding self-development. I've already dipped my toe in that area. I already kind of went through multiple different modalities and experiences, but I wanted to ensure that I could get people the results that they
Yeah.
wanted. And I needed to be confident in my skill set. So I put myself through the certification. It was fantastic. And then so that was also in the February. That is when I launched the podcast. And by the September, I was offering like my coaching services.
Wow, that's awesome. Like that's so cool. So tell me about the coaching. Like, I'm assuming it's a one-on-one type of thing, or do you do group coaching, or how does that go?
Yeah, so I actually initially started one-on-one coaching.
Okay.
And I think for any of you that are interested in that, it is the best way to gain experience, to understand how to lead as a coach and to connect with other people, build your own confidence, and really get time with people to understand like their needs in like common themes that are coming up with people, particularly in this space. So from there, I noticed that in your first couple of years of entrepreneurship, and Lisa, you probably felt like this with your photography business and what you're doing now with like Seasoned Dialogue, and it's you kind of look to other people for inspiration, which I think is really great.
Yeah.
However, we are in the realm of the golden era, meaning like there's so much information available to us at our fingertips, and social media is just very much a highlight reel of everybody's life. So it's really easy to fall into that hole of like comparison and
Right.
trying to grab somebody else's blueprint of their life and apply it to your own because you see that it gave them success. So it's really interesting to be able to decipher between the two, like inspiration versus just trying to do what somebody else
Yeah.
has done. Because when you try to apply somebody else's life, vision, even strategy at times to your own, you're going to feel a lot of you're not going to feel very aligned because
Yeah.
you're not necessarily clear on what it is that you want to do. So upon that, I would say actually in 2022, I really came to terms with how I wanted to conduct my own business and what I want to do while still being open-minded to how it's going to unfold. So that actually led me to taking my coaching services and crafting it in a way that it's an online self-paced course. And this is
Mhm.
something that I've taken clients through, gotten real feedback, done market research, and sure that it will get people the results that they want. But I would say it takes about 10 weeks to complete. And there's an education component, and then there is an implementation component, because we know you can learn all the information under the sun, but if you're not actually implementing things into your life, you're not going to get the changes that you desire. And then the third pillar of my program is the community portion. So you get to be put into like a group platform where all other students participate in the course. So that program is called CMA, Confident Mindset Accelerator. It's like my pride and joy. It's kind of everything I've learned and applied all into one nice package with like a pretty bow.
Wow. I love the fact that you said, I wanted to learn more. Because a lot, we look at coaching and it's like this booming thing now. But I think educational background saying, I did this, instead of just moving from our own perceptions and maybe the way that we think for ourselves and coaching someone through it. I think it certifies you more. You're believable. You want to take information from someone who is assisting and helping, in your opinion. Now it's mostly women, right? Who you do coaching for?
Yeah,
What
I only work with women.
Okay, what is the biggest thing? Say someone is looking for you to be a coach for them. What is the number one thing that they're looking for? What's the number one thing in your coaching?
I would say people just want to feel more confident. As like
Yeah.
high level as that is, I
Mhm.
think confidence is such a big thing, and people have different interpretations of what confidence actually means.
Mhm.
And we all understand or know or have heard the saying, like, you look good, you feel good, right? Like
Mhm.
your confidence really fluctuates, but there's so much more to it in how actually showing up confidently in your life and like what that actually entails. Because something that we spoke about yesterday on my podcast, Lisa, is like life is very unfair and you're going to be thrown a lot of different curveballs throughout your journey in your own human experience. And it's ultimately how you ride the wave of that. So, for example, if you notice you're confident one day because like you're feeling yourself, that's amazing. We all love that, right? And there's also nothing wrong with you enjoying a compliment. You enjoy having your ego stroked. That is okay. However, if you are noticing that you are so easily impacted by so much of your external reality. Like your mood and your emotions are absolutely all over the place. Your emotions are running your show. You're giving up your power to other people to pretty much dictate what you should and should not be doing with your life. Or your own confidence level is merely dependent on the validation of other people, which is so much more common than people talk about.
Yes.
That is that's so heavy, so
Mm-hmm.
heavy.
Yeah.
And it really keeps people playing small. It keeps people in a box,
Mm.
and it really keeps people from actually connecting to themselves. So something that is pretty much the theme all throughout my coaching within CMA, my course, is what self-confidence actually is like your level of self-trust with
Yes.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have deep rooted, like fulfilling, unshakable trust with yourself, things can come at you. Challenges will occur. Your feelings will get hurt. You'll have low moments. It's okay if you want to lay in bed, eat ice cream, and binge Netflix for the day. But at the end, you're like, I'm having a moment and I'm
Yeah.
giving myself grace and space to feel this.
Mm.
However, I am going to be okay. I can
That-
fall on my face a million times and get back up. I trust myself enough to make a decision without asking everybody else's opinion. I trust that I can do this. I trust that I'm resourceful enough to figure it out if it doesn't go the way that I want. When you have that level of self-trust, that is where your confidence actually comes from. And then your confidence ultimately will bleed out into all other areas. It's definitely not just your physical appearance, but it's how
Right.
you show up in your relationships, your security, how you feel in your romantic relationships, how you feel as a role as a parent, how you feel in your career, in your friendships, all of the things. So that is something that's probably the biggest theme that
Mm-hmm.
women come to me with.
Wow.
And the first hurdle is like actually getting a grasp and understanding what confidence really is.
Wow, that was a mouthful, but that was like what a lot of people needed to hear. One thing you said was when you were talking about how we kind of, well, a lot of people, um, they use the opinions of others or lean into the opinions of others, whether they're likable, not likable. During your coaching sessions, is it something that women identify with, or is it something that you pull out of them? You know, is it through a conversation that they know that that's what they do, or is it something you say, I think this is how you're showing up, and you help them through that process? Like, do most people know?
I would honestly say most people know. And
Mm.
the reason is, and this is also something in regards from like a business perspective and really empowering myself to create the business and the people that I want to work with the way that I want. And that took over a year or something to really like tune and be aligned with. But I really try my best to attract very ambitious women, people that are into self-development, that are open-minded to learn. You don't need to know all the things. You don't need to do all the modalities. Like, you know what I mean? That takes time to slowly open your comfort zone in that regard. But I am attracting those type of people that want to do the work because I am very transparent. I was like, I will give you the roadmap. I will teach you what you need to teach. I will show you what you need to actually implement to make changes, and I will be here to support you along the way. However, it is when it comes to working on yourself, it's always about how you show up, and
Yes.
what you give is what you receive. If you are coming to me like, well, I need you to change my life, and it's like you plan on taking a back seat, it's like
Yeah.
I'm not your girl. I'm not the person you want to be working with because
That's
I don't stand for that. And
mm,
there's a huge component in really taking ruthless accountability for your role in your own human experience.
mm.
Ruthless accountability, regardless of what deck of cards you've been dealt, take responsibility and accountability for your own participation in this life. And that requires you to do the work. I'm not going to do it for you.
Right. That's right. So I want to jump into the podcast, and I want to ask you, why did you name it Gold Digger?
Oh, it's so funny. I actually had this conversation with somebody else that I did an interview with literally just a couple days ago, because she was so sweet. She was going on about how she did so much like marinating and thinking about her podcast name
Mhm.
and like all of these meanings behind it. And I was like, that is so fantastic. I can honestly say that I was at my old apartment in the city with my partner, and we were sitting on the couch, and he's lovely and like my biggest supporter, but we're very different in a way where he doesn't post online. He's like very private. So
Uh-huh.
like as I continue to like put myself out there, it's also like a bit of like, whoa, okay, Brie, we're doing this. Like, cause I'm an association to him. And one
Oh,
day I'm sitting on the couch with him, and we're just, I think, watching a show or something. And I turned to him, I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast and I'm gonna call it The Gold Digger Guide. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah, isn't that like the sickest name ever? Like, it's funny. Like, it's kind of funny and quirky, which, because obviously playing on gold digger,
right,
right? Which
right.
is very me. Like, I am cheeky like that, but I'm very goal oriented, and I like to add on guide because I did envision it like a guided experience.
Mhm.
And it's really funny because I was actually just talking to someone not long ago also about like how they're wanting to rebrand their entire podcast, and I don't have that feeling. Like, I still feel like very, very aligned, and I'm coming up close to like 100 episodes. It's just over
Wow.
2 years, and I'm like, no, it still feels really good. Like, it feels like very aligned with like my messaging and like kind of who I am, you know what I mean?
I love it. So on your podcast, is it mostly personal experiences? What are you when your listeners are listening to you, what are they taking away from their experience with you on your podcast?
Yeah, I would say they've gotten to know me quite well. And throughout the journey of the podcast, the level of vulnerability that I shared early on versus what I share now is honestly black and white, like so extreme. And that again just comes with like expanding your comfort zone bit by bit. But when people, I do both solo episodes and interviews. I am very particular about who I bring onto the podcast. I have boundaries around that. It's really important to me that I feel very aligned, because I think my community and my listeners trust me. And
Yes.
so when bringing someone on, I want them to know that it's because I trust this person. Like, I really feel good about what they bring to the table. Hence why I was so excited to have you on. I was like, Lisa feels great. Like, I love her message. I love what she's doing. Like that, like it has to feel like that. And I really try to change it up. So in like under the self-development perspective, I take it from a lens of like what would be very supportive for women in connecting to themselves, self-awareness, supporting them through self-development. And I think that can really change. So for example, I had a woman on who was fantastic, and she's to a degree like kind of a financial advisor, but she has a ton of investment properties, and she's just like a money gal. Like, she knows all the ins and outs of money, which I'm like, that is super supportive for women. Like, there was a lot that I learned in that conversation. And then I had someone on just 2 weeks ago, and she shared her entire journey with infertility and having miscarriages. And now she has a surrogate and her whole journey. Cause I'm like, that is very much my demographic of like how she went through that and losing her mother and all of these things. And then I'm also on there doing episodes like, here's a 5-step process that will help you in productivity or help you working through heartbreak. So I really keep it in a realm that's like, I know would be very supportive, because I also look to my current self, but also a little bit of my past self, because that's who I think of a lot of my listeners are, and like what I would have needed at that time. You know what I mean?
Yes. I find too, even in the beginning when you were talking about your vulnerability, I don't know if it is for everyone, but that opening up of the first couple of episodes, you do want to like have this connection with your listeners, and you're sharing your experiences, and it is true, they become aligned with you, they understand you, and one of the biggest takeaways that I have gotten as well is that I have my email open so they can email me, and they always say, understood the story because this is where I am now, or this is where I was at a certain point. And so it helps identify that, okay, I'm on the right path, that I'm doing the right things. And then many times also, even in my own personal sharing, I'm talking to myself. Do you feel like that? You know, many times when you're sharing an experience, or you're just kind of maybe giving some tips, or you're just implementing something, it comes back to yourself like, I'm saying this, but it's also something that I need to do more, okay.
You're giving yourself like a little reality check. It's like, you're going to teach this. You got to walk the walk if you're going to talk the talk.
Right. That's right. That's right. Wow. Okay. So I have another question. So, what was the most memorable episode that you did, whether it was solo or with someone else, and why?
Memorable episode. That's a great question. I've never been asked anything like that. A memorable episode. Okay, I'm not too sure what the episode is called. I can't remember what I called it. It was a solo episode.
Okay.
And I believe it was in the fall of 2022. And essentially, what I shared was ultimately, like, my biggest insecurity, I would say, growing up was my own level of intelligence. And this all stemmed from in grade 2, my parents chose to like hold me back a year. I'm born in December. I was a bit delayed. I didn't really talk. There's multiple reasons. It was the right move, like 1,000%. But for whatever reason, I carried this with me forever. And I was big into sports. So as I got older, obviously, as you know, because of certain leagues, like, your age is always a thing, right? It's like when you're certain age. And so I would always be questioned by people like, oh, why are you playing on this league? Or why are you playing on this league? The thing was, because of also kind of showing my age a bit, like, social media was extremely limited, all of these things, I was able to lie about it pretty much 90% of the time. I was for 90% of the time, I was pretty much be able, like, my parents put me in school a year late. I was born in December, duh. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I used to do. And like, even to the point before this current partner, I was in a relationship for 7 years and I never told him. Like, this is how big of like an insecurity it was of mine. So I held on to it for whatever reason. And then so funny, now in this current relationship, I told him after 3 years. It was hilarious. I took him to the beach and I started crying, and he's like kind of laughing because he's like, "Breanne, this is not a big deal." I'm like, "You don't understand. It was a big deal to me." And it required so much power in me owning that my own level of intelligence was always something that I fought with. So I found when I was growing up, although I was extremely ambitious and very much a go-getter, that is natural to me. But there is a part now, looking back, having the knowledge and the experience that I do, I felt like I would try and overcompensate for a lot because I had that insecurity. Like, I always had to be on student council. Like, I always had to do like win awards, all of these things, because it's like, I always had to make up for this like flaw that I had as a kid. So long story short, to answer you, I shared this in a podcast episode in the fall. And I was like, how funny is this? At that time, I was 30 years old. And I'm like, I hid this for 30 years, like, as much as I possibly can. I don't tell anyone. And I'm like, I'm coming on the podcast and literally putting it out to the world. And it felt good. I started crying, talking to myself. I started crying on the podcast, but it felt so liberating. And I'm just like, this was some people might be like, yeah, that sucks. That is a big deal. That isn't a big deal. Doesn't matter. But it was a big deal to me. Like, it was always a really big deal. And so that episode, can't remember the title, but I very much remember recording it.
Wow, like, it's amazing that you say that, and then you say on the opposite end, your partner was laughing at you, because in his head, it's like it's not a big deal, but
Yeah.
for you, it's something that you carry for a long time. And what I've learned also is, even with our experiences, and even with, the things that we may not have liked about ourselves or our insecurities, it does follow us into adulthood. And I
Mhm.
mean, it challenges us. I remember having this conversation with my husband, and he talks about this often, especially when we were dating before we got married. And he used to get picked on a lot. And so we still stay in the same area that, we went to school, we never moved. And even in this adulthood as a man, he sees the same people who were as kids who would pick at him. But what the turn of the event was that they would come up to him and speak to him. They were so mean to him then, but they would come and speak. And I would always say, even though we don't understand it, we have to understand, like, children are being children. It's not right, but children were being children. And now that we have grown, it's nothing to fear, but it still holds us captive sometimes when we think about our insecurities. And on the other end, it's like, I understand it. I definitely, look, I didn't laugh because it's not like yours like your thing, but it's just amazing to me how long he had held on to that and that fear of, and like you were saying, like, he overcompensated with because they would always pick my husband. Listen, he likes his shirts tucked in, he's a neat and clean guy. And back then, like in the early 80s, like that, and even the 90s, when it was the big pants, my husband never was that type of man, so he was called all kind of names. So it's like now it was buying certain clothes. He wanted to look nice, honey. And that was the overcompensation. And it was like, you're fine just the way you are. Like, I get it, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I
Yeah.
love the story. I
Yeah.
love the story, by the way, but I get it. So I listened to one of your episodes, and it was why is it more important to be present instead of productive? And you began with talking about how, you had strep throat.
Yeah. I didn't have a hot spring. I was quite ill.
And I laughed when you said when the doctor came in and she told you basically you had strep throat, and you was like, I want to cry. Like, I'm expecting to go somewhere, and now you give me this news, and I'm ready to get on the boat. I'm ready to go do my thing. But in the episode, you were talking about the productivity and how you realized in those moments you weren't present, even though you were, there and to enjoy the time that you were there. You were also kind of spacing out and thinking about certain things. I want you, if you can, when you realize that you weren't being present in the moment to enjoy yourself, and you shifted yourself back in, are there any tips for other people when they find themselves veering off to the other side, thinking about certain things and not staying the course and where they are? What helped you to come back?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say in society, we have this like societal norm of like people being obsessed with being busy and then saying that they're busy all the time.
Yeah.
So something that I've spoken about in the past is really identifying like being busy versus being productive. So that's like one component in how you want to be productive in regards to like how you can move the needle forward every single day towards something that you want to achieve, right? Like the goal is always like 1% better every day with the resources that you have at hand, understanding that we're like forever changing. So that's one key. So productivity is something that I feel as though I could almost say feel like mastered to a degree. Like I'm very disciplined. I really theme my days. I'm really good with boundaries, like very, very good with boundaries and like what feels really good to me. And that took time to really implement and be aligned with. But I really know what makes my clock tick. And I know what it's like when I'm on the verge of burnout. So I shared that perspective and those tips and those tools that I've learned over time with people because I know that's real life. It is what it is. Like life is hectic. But on the other side, I noticed that because I can so personally easily tap into like my masculine energy, as I've already highlighted here in this conversation, like my go-getter, pushing
Yes.
forward,
Yes.
like, like I can do that fairly easily. Not to say that everybody needs to be like that or that's the right way, but naturally, I just come by that. So that can sometimes lead me to just like constantly be fixated on more
Mm,
so the future, what needs to be done, what my routine is, what I'm going to go through tomorrow, what I want that to look like in a week, a month, a year, whatever it may be. And then I notice that I'm not present. Like
mm,
I'm not present, or you're with your friends and your family and it's like a Sunday afternoon and you're hanging out with your family. And then I'm thinking about like what I need to do for work for the
yes.
next day and things like that. And I wanted to highlight this whole concept because although productivity is great and understanding and defining that in comparison to busyness, like that is really important. But on the other side, if you're not present in your actual life in real time, you're not actually like living. You know what I mean? Like we can make it as like clear as that, because if say you're on your deathbed at whatever age, you're in your 90s, say you've had a good life, whatever it may be, right? But you're looking back and you're thinking about all of the experience of you've had, like all of the situations you've come across, all of the conversations that you've partaken in, and you start thinking like, I was always thinking about something else when I was doing that,
Mm,
Like
mm,
that 4th of July, like, yeah, but like, where was my head at? I was fixated on this, or you know what I mean? And then next thing you know, a week's gone by and you've just been borderline robotic in like a high stress energy, thinking about all the things that need to get done, right? A lot of people may be dependent on you, depending on your family circumstance and all of those things. And it actually takes away from you being present at hand. So in one way, it's amazing to be ambitious or even just productive. No matter what you have, whether you're a stay-at-home parent, whether you're single, in relationship, you're super career driven, regardless of what you're doing, like it's great to be productive, but if you're not actually present in your own life, whether it's good or bad, you're
mm.
not actually experiencing it. You're thinking about what you think it should be. So instead of looking at your external reality for what you think it should be, more so accepting it for what it actually is, and then processing in the given moment. So anything that can actually help you be present is
Mhm.
doing like a check-in, like a very quick check-in. I do this all the time. So I'm like, name 5 colors that are around me. Like in my head, I'll be like, what colors? Super quick, super quick. The smell, like think of your senses. When you get into your body and out of your head, that is going to help you become a present. So
Yes.
senses, smell, touch, anything like that. Because you have to understand that when working under the NLP umbrella, um, to explain this, ultimately, like our subconscious runs our show. It's where all of our belief systems are stored. Think of your subconscious mind as a filing cabinet of your entire life up until now. It has every single experience stored in it. Okay. But we're only consciously aware about 10% of our mind. So any like memory or experience or belief that you have is driven by your subconscious. So
Mhm.
when you're thinking about doing something and you're how can I go into not too much detail here, but when you're thinking about doing something or making a decision, that is being driven by your subconscious mind. And understand that every thought that you have is made up of a neural pathway. So you can think of a neural pathway as like a linked chain. Say you have a belief about something, right? And the more you think that, the more you strengthen the neural pathway. So, for example, you're thinking about the future, you're not
Right.
being present, you're anxious about whatever the situation is in the future. That neural pathway is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. That is why our thoughts are on repeat. That is
Mhm.
why the next day you notice you're thinking about the same old stuff. And it's actually keeping you from being present in the
Wow.
moment. Does that make sense?
That definitely makes sense. Wow. Girl, I just got educated.
Yeah,
I
it's
got
pretty mind blowing.
wow, that is amazing. Let me sit here and ponder on that for a minute. Because that was wow. Okay. Like that was useful information. I never thought about it that way. You really broke it down in a very cohesive way where I think many people will understand
Good,
with
good.
everything that you have going on. Now, do you still actively, I know you say yoga, but do you teach it?
No, I don't take that was a little bit of a season of life. It could very much come back. I would do it more so in like a workshop setting or like an event setting versus like teaching in the studio. I would like it from a perspective of like collaborating with someone, of like a self-development seminar or something. But I don't I don't feel aligned like teaching in a studio right now. And I'm like all about what only feels good. And I very much live my life in seasons. You know what I mean? Like I totally accept and am open to like chaotic seasons, student seasons, master seasons, teaching seasons, all of those things. So with that being said, I always just allow myself to lean into like what feels really, really good in that season. And right now, it just doesn't feel aligned.
What what made Breanne know who she was at the age of 31? Because even in my thinking, I'm like, it's still relatively young. You're just coming out of 20s. Like the 20s is when you're trying to figure out life. I mean, you are messing up and getting it back together and messing up and getting it back together at 31. Why does Breanne, I know it's lots of learning, lots of getting to know yourself as you grow older. But how is it that you know yourself so well? And when you speak of what feels good to you, what feels good, making decisions, how did you get to that point?
I can give you a little bit of like a high level. I'll try to make a long story short in
Yeah.
this answer because I feel as though a little bit of my, no, a lot of my human experience has contributed to like who I am today. So to date back, I would say like coming out of university, I grew up in Niagara Falls. It's a small town. And I was very unhappy in university because I was studying at a local university and it felt more so like an extended high school. I felt like I was missing out on something, just something wasn't clicking. So I decided that I was going to do an exchange abroad.
Mhm.
So I went and studied abroad. I studied in Sweden, didn't know a single soul in the country, let alone the continent. And from that, I would like to preface one thing before I kind of dive into this. Traveling is very much a part of my story. However, I do not think you need to go out and find yourself and go traveling. It's great if you do, but that's something that I always just like to preface because I feel as though that's again noted on like the highlight reel of social media that you need to be going and doing that. And I don't think you do. And I don't think everybody has that accessible to them. And I'm very aware of my own privilege and that I was able to make that happen. So I just wanted to note that, but that kind of kickstarted things more so from a perspective of like me being on my own,
Mm.
seeing how resilient I am. I started to journal when I was there. And then upon graduating, I didn't go to my graduation. I booked a flight and traveled the world. I was supposed to be gone for like 9 months and I stayed out for 2 years. My parents were going to kill me.
Oh.
And they were like, "Are you going to come home?" So I lived in Australia for a year. I was in Southeast Asia. I was in Dubai, South America, all of the places. And upon coming home, just to give you all listening a little bit of a timeline, I was in my mid 20s. I was like 26. So I was very much doing that thing, Lisa, of like, like not knowing what I was doing.
Right.
But because I was from kind of a small town, I came home and all of my friends are getting married. They're buying houses. I was so broke because I paid my own way through school, paid my own way through traveling. And I was feeling at a serious all-time low. I moved back in with my parents. And then I was in a long-term relationship at almost about seven years.
Mhm.
And the one and only epiphany I've had to date, literally. I woke up one morning and ended it out of nowhere.
Wow.
And it took a lot of people by surprise, family, friends, my partner at the time. And I'm like, I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want this. And it takes a lot of courage to do that when nothing is wrong. Like
Yeah.
nothing happened, nothing was wrong. Timeline was to get married. And I'm like, my gut is telling me otherwise. And this is why it's so important, people, to be connected to your intuition and your gut feeling to be able to act on it. And that's something I can touch on in a minute. But that's what I did in that moment. And the trajectory of my life completely changed. I was so broke and very unhappy, but I was still like doing my thing.
Yeah.
And I worked a lot, and I decided I worked during the week, and then on the weekends, I worked at a club, as you do, which is an awful environment, but great money. And I saved up $5,000 cash to put myself through my yoga teaching certification. Had no interest in teaching yoga. I just knew I needed like a flip of the switch. I knew I needed something that was like going to flip me on my head and help me figure my life out. And that's what it really did. It like, I came out of, it was 2 weeks. It was at like an ashram. So you're in like almost like a cult like setting. Like you don't see outside world at all. It was very, very intense. And upon leaving that, I just felt like a raw onion, in all honesty. I just, so much had been opened. And I'm like, I don't even know. I just was so connected to myself. And so that brings us to about 2017. And slowly but surely from there, I started to really blend this whole concept of my sensitivity and vulnerability and my empathic ability is a superpower, along with my very ambitious drive. Because what I had been doing prior to that was I felt a lot of shame and guilt around showing any sense of sensitivity. I thought it was always kind of a weakness, hence the overcompensation. So that's what I would always do, which was ultimately denying a part of me. But after my yoga teacher training, I was able to kind of blend the two. And I tried a million and one things after that, like I tried direct sales. I tried the corporate life. I moved to the city from Niagara Falls. I started a new relationship with a completely different foundation, which is amazing. And that then led me to really understanding that I wanted to build a business, not even like I want to be an entrepreneur, but more so like I want to make an impact on people. And that led me to build my business and led me to create my podcast and all of those things, which ultimately just happened 2 years ago, which isn't a very long time. And that has now made me 30, 31. I've paid off pretty much all of my debt. My partner and I just bought a house.
Wow.
I've never felt more aligned with what I'm doing. And it's very much on my own timeline. It's on
Yeah.
like my friends and everything were married a long time ago, 5 years ago. And I'm just like still doing me, and I'm really loving it.
Why? I mean, the fact that there was a sense of you, girl, when you said, just broke off the relationship. But it's everything that you said afterwards, where it became the beginning of everything else to follow.
Mhm.
Sometimes we don't know why, we just do. It's like this movement to just do. And I wonder if, in the moments that you have to yourself, if you think, wow, if I would have stayed in that relationship, where would I have been? Not to say that the partner was bad, but just, you just know, or have you ever thought like, maybe I wouldn't be at this place? That was the beginning of showing up for myself.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I think, and again, not at all to speak Ilya upon him. However, upon like, he was with me through a lot of the travels. However, there was a moment on the ending of living in Australia. Essentially, you have a year visa for those of you that don't know. And he got a job over in San Francisco at about the 10-month mark and was like, I need to go to California. And he's like, so like, we got to move. And I was like, I think I'm going to hang back in Australia for 2 months and travel just on my own. And he's like, what are you talking about? You don't know anybody. And I was like, yeah, but I'll figure it out. And I think he actually knew before I did that I was going to end things. I didn't know. I had no idea. But I
Mhm.
think he started to see me really push back and start to find myself, because when we started our relationship, I was 19 and he was 6 years older than I was. So that's a big age gap at that time. And I very much lived in his shadow. I
Mhm.
followed route. I thought his life was exciting. All I knew was school in my small town, and he had traveled the world. I'm really grateful because he exposed me to a lot of things. But by the end, I think I started to find my own voice, and he actually knew before I did. And that is ultimately what happened. That is why that epiphany happened. And I knew it just took everybody by surprise, but I knew in that 30 seconds, I'm like, if I do not act on this, I am not going to do it. And funny enough, because I was living at home, he
Mm.
was in California, right? I was supposed to meet him in 2 weeks or something in Chicago. And I was crying in my childhood bedroom. And I was 26 or 27. And my mom walks in and she's like, Bree, what's up? What's wrong? And I was like, oh, I gotta end my relationship. And she's flabbergasted, shocked. She's like, Bree, are you sure? How about you sleep on it for a week? Is something wrong? And I'm like, no, if I don't do this right now, I'm not going to do it. And hands down, still to this day, she's like, that is the one and only time I am so happy you did not listen to me. And I was like, because moms always, honestly, lots of times they end up being right in
Yep.
depending on your relationship, of
Yes,
course, but in a lot of ways, my mom oftentimes is right. But there is nothing stronger than listening to your intuition and your
that's
gut
right.
feeling. And that is why that's so important, and why it's so important for people to be connected to that, because that is what I did that day.
Y'all use this story. Use this story as the emphasis of why we need to be listening to our intuition. Like, this was the perfect example, because many times it's like, not to say, everything is small, but it could be just something simple. You know what I'm saying? Like, wait 5 minutes before you leave the house, and then realizing, something else happened. But this was life changing for you. I mean, this was life changing in the sorts of going a different direction in which you could have been going. And then even after that, even if that relationship didn't work out and expanded beyond the time that you said no, it still could have went a different direction. So the timing was where it needed to be. Wow. Okay. Before we wrap this up, I want to that was wow. Wow. I mean, I got to go back to that, because I've heard of situations, where it's like our inner speaks to us and we move on it, but not to that degree where everything that you did afterwards changed. The way that you moved in your life changed, the relationship that you have now, and then just knowing yourself. And I think what's important also, that you honed into, but not really, and me looking, at the situation with you speaking of the age gap, sometimes with that age difference, people are settled, you know, at a certain, they have this expectancy in their mind of where they need to be, what they want to do. And by no fault of his, he was ready to take on this job and do what he needed to do, but you knew in your inner, like, no, I still have life to live. Like, I don't want to be squared off. I think I need to explore a little bit more. And wow, that's so awesome. If you could leave someone with anything, anything from your heart, the listeners, what would it be? And after you do that, I want you to let everybody know how they can connect with you as well.
Yeah. So what I want to leave with people, this is actually a tangible tip,
Mhm.
because we're on the topic of intuition and gut feeling. So I know people obviously hear the story. It's a more of extreme story, right? But there's things that you can do to really strengthen your tuition, starting today on a very small level, that you will then start to build self-trust. That is where it all stems from. So what you need to start doing whenever making a decision, right? Because we all make many decisions throughout the day, Whenever making a decision, I want you to start asking yourself, if you don't want to do something, right? Would this feel easier or would this feel lighter if I choose not to do it? Okay.
Mm,
If it feels easier, it is most likely your anxiety. It
mhm,
is. Understand also your subconscious mind, its only job is to keep you safe. So it's going to take the path of least resistance.
mm,
And I think because we live in such like a heightened world now and it's so overstimulated, everybody has anxiety on one degree or another. It gets very blurred between it's like your gut feeling or your anxiety, and to get away from that, you need to start identifying it. Now, if it feels lighter, it's like this is a weight off my shoulders. This just doesn't feel good. You don't necessarily need to know the answer, but I'm talking like it literally just feels a weight off your shoulders. That is your intuition telling you like this isn't for you.
wow.
This isn't the right timing. This
Mm,
is something that you can literally implement on a daily basis with very small decision making, which will contribute to helping you build your self-trust, which will end up rippling out into building confidence. It will if you continue to practice this.
mm.
So that would be the takeaway or the note. And where you can all find me is you can follow me on Instagram. That's kind of like my main platform at Breanne Burke, first and last name, super easy. As Lisa said earlier, I have my podcast, The Goal Digger Guide, and it's very much along the same premise of what this conversation was about. So if you're feeling that, head over there. I will send you the CMA link. I also have a freebie which is a miniature 5-module journaling course. I can send that to you, Lisa, if you want to share it with your listeners for free. And that's pretty much it.
Wow, Breanne, you dropped so many jewels, like really and truly, it was insightful. I mean, things I haven't even thought about. A lot of it was mind blowing. Thank you so much. I mean, really, like, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Y'all, I'm gonna, once she send this stuff to me, I'm gonna put it down below. I want y'all to follow her. Like, the jewels that she just dropped, the knowledge, and at 31, honey, she got her life together. I love
Oh,
it.
thank you. Thank you so much. You're the best.
I love it. All right, y'all. So we signing off. And I'm gonna see y'all guys on the next episode. All right, peace.